Hi everyone, it's April here and welcome back to another video. This is my very first art school video, which I'm hoping is going to be a series of videos I do over the next year or so, every couple of months, where I take a month out to kind of learn something and just kind of show you how I did it, what I learned, and maybe give some tips and tricks that I found along the way. And this first month is all about portraits. So I wanted to get back to doing portrait drawing, which I have been neglected for a while. So I decided that I would study portraits for a month. So I decided to split this video into two parts because it was turning out to be quite long. And I'm going to post one now, and then the second part is going to be on Thursday. So this is week one, and then the next video will be a little bit shorter because I didn't film so much during the other weeks. But I hope that you enjoy the first part of my portraits art school. So I thought the first thing that I could have a quick look at is what I've done in the past. So I just went through all of my sketchbooks and I just picked a few that I think will be good to have a look at. We're not going to look at all of them, don't worry. Let's take a journey all the way back to 2017. Not that long ago, 3 and a bit years, I guess. Decided I wanted to draw. So, doodle some faces. This is one of the very first drawings I did in the sketchbook. I think it was the first I did at work. And after this page, I realised I had a lot to go before I remembered how to draw again. Because at one point in my life, I did draw quite a lot. So that started me on a whole journey. What did I want to learn to draw first of all? Faces. That's what everyone kind of wants to do, right? It's like the ultimate faces. So I started a challenge, 100-day challenge in September of that year, 2017. And I basically just drew faces. So I'm not going to go through all of this. I actually have a tour of this on my channel if you want to see it, with all my sketchbooks. But basically, I just tried to draw faces, and I didn't do many tutorials or anything. I just kind of like went on what instinct, kind of what I had known from the past, from lessons and things. And by the end of it, by the end of 100, I was actually feeling pretty comfortable drawing faces. So let's see if I can skip to the last few faces that I drew, the ones that I'm actually still really proud of today. So looking at these faces here, I kind of came up with a style that I liked with the pen, and the kind of like the stylization that I liked. Now, the proportions are still a little bit off. The likenesses probably isn't 100% to the reference photo, but I was really enjoying drawing faces at this point. So these are the last few that I drew. And then, as you can probably imagine, I got really burnt out with drawing faces, so I didn't draw them for a long time. And when I came back, I had remembered, but I didn't practice enough to kind of keep improving. So I kept practicing faces, and as I went on, I got more and more stylized. Sometimes I got really cartoony, but I was kind of enjoying using what I had learned from drawing faces to make them more cartoony, and I wanted to find like a cartoony style. And I even went so far as to cartoonize drawings that I had done. So I would draw a face here, and then I would try and like make that more cartoony, which was really fun doing that. But you know, it just kind of continued from there. So I kept drawing faces different ways. I think this was an earlier one where I was still trying to do more realism, and you can see like the proportions are really off. At the time I was really proud of these, but now looking at them, I can see the forehead's too short, the mouth's massive, you know, like the eyes are placed wrong. And it's just things that you pick up in time after doing lots of practice, and also by getting your vision up, because there's two parts in art really. There's the hand movements, and there's the seeing. So seeing what you're going to draw, seeing stuff in your mind. So I just kept drawing, stylizing them, kind of coming up with things that I liked. I liked these at the time, I still like them now. Even ones like this where I got like a little bit weird, I still enjoyed it. But I had lost something that was doing during my 100 faces challenge, which is where I was really trying to get the likeness down and kind of study the proportions and things. I was focusing a little bit too much on stylization. And then it got really weird. I decided to completely throw away faces and go completely cartoony. And I started drawing these little faces. And I basically have been drawing these pretty much, like every time I draw faces now, I would just draw like a cartoon version of a face, like this. And I do like these. Don't look at that. And I do think these are super fun to draw, but at the same time I want to be able to draw a cartoon, and I also want to be able to draw a face and have someone, you know, I just want to be proud of drawing a portrait and knowing that it looks like that person. And I don't know, I want to come up with like a better style, a more realistic style again. So I'll show you where I currently am. So these are all done in the last month or so. So very cartoony again, very cartoony, cartoony. And this is what I came up with yesterday. So it took me about 40 minutes to draw, roughly. And I'm happy with how it is. I can definitely see a lot of flaws, a lot of things that I need to improve, that I want to improve. But considering I hadn't tried to draw a face like this for a good year now, I was quite happy with my starting position. And before we move on, I thought it would be good to go over the things that I currently do now when I'm drawing a portrait, and to see what else I can do to improve. So the first thing that I definitely need to improve on is the angle of my sketchbook. So right now it is flat to the screen. You can see it because the camera's pointing straight down, but really I should have it tilted up so it's parallel to my eyes, because if I do this, this is kind of how I'm viewing it, and you can see all of the proportions. They go out of whack, so maybe I think I'm drawing it well, but then when you turn it up, it looks a lot different. So the first thing I think I'm going to be trying to practice this month is drawing it at an angle, like this. I'm going to pop into Procreate and explain some other little things that I do. So I just took a photo of the drawing to kind of show you the kind of things I'm thinking of when I start to draw. And these things I definitely want to improve on and also add more to them. So the first thing is, when I draw the face, is I'm basically just looking at the shape of the face. And this is when I also try and get the angle. So I don't always draw like this. Sometimes I'll start with the nose first. But most of the time I'll just get like the head in, the neck, and then go from there. I don't know if this is the best way to draw. If you see from the speed drawing, I actually have to go back in and erase the head because I draw it too big to begin with. So sometimes I also start with the nose. And I find that if you start with something like the nose or the eyes or the lips, you can go from there and you can work from like using this as an anchor and working your way out. So the main thing I do when I'm looking at portraits is I'll look at the distance between things. So I'll look at the distance between this nose to this eye, and then from this eye up to the start of the eyebrow, and then from the eyebrow over to where the ear is, you know, down to the lips, down to the chin. So that's doing distances. And another similar thing to distances is angles. So look at the angle of the nose, for example, the angle of an eyebrow, and then how that angle matches up to the angle of the eye. You know, how this angle of this nose is parallel to that, for example. You know, the angle of the chin and how that meets to the neck. These are all things I can definitely improve on, and I'm going to be doing that, but I just thought it was good to kind of like explain how I do things as I go. Another thing that I really rely on is shapes. So shadow shapes. So this shape here of this nose, the shadow of that nose, this shape of this shadow, maybe the lips, and here, so you can see with the shadow, the shape of the shadow will help you draw the jaw. And you can do the same with highlights. So like maybe this has a highlight on the nose there, maybe there's a highlight here. All these things can all be used together. So you can do the highlights, and then you can bring in the distances. So the distance of the shadow to where the eyebrow is, the angle of this highlight and how it is in relation to this shadow, things like that. So these are all kind of things that I have just started to do over the last few years that I have been drawing portraits, and you'll also hear a lot of these things in tutorials online. So when you're looking online, people will often talk about distances, measuring, even things like pulling down lines, which I do sometimes. So like the corner of the eye, if you pull it down and see where it meets up, you know, things like that. So lots of things that I'm doing aren't special at all. You'll hear about them. But the one thing I'm not really going to do in this month when I'm learning is doing things like this, because sometimes I'll do this just roughly when I'm doing like cartoons and stuff, but when I'm drawing faces, I rarely do it. You guys have all probably heard of Andrew Loomis, where he does the one where I can't even do it like from memory, but you know, you do the side of the face and then you do the angle, and that's like goes up and that. I mean, I'm sure this really helps a lot of people, but for me, I've tried doing this in the past and it feels so robotic and I just can't handle it. So I'm just going to be going with the flow, learning things as I go, and I'm hoping a combination of lots of practice and a few Skillshare courses, tutorials, things like that towards the end of the month are really going to hone my skills and be better than, even though I still love drawing faces like this, I also want to draw cool faces too. So with that, let's begin the first week. I thought for the first week, I'm just going to practice drawing faces. So I think it's going to be really helpful to do a challenge. And I've decided to take part in the challenge Med's 50 Heads by Ahmed Eldori. And I think this is going to be awesome because I've seen the Pinterest board and it looks a lot less scary than the 100 Heads challenge, and also there's less head. So a lot of you have probably seen this video. If not, I'll leave it in the description. I'm going to leave all the resources that I found in the description, and I might even pop it on my website just for myself for future reference as well. But basically, Med's 50 Heads is basically what you're seeing here. It's a Pinterest board that he's popped together. So this is the Pinterest board for Med's 50 Heads, and I haven't actually looked at the board, but from the video I did recognize some of the faces that I've drawn before. Like, I've drawn this girl, I've drawn this girl, I've drawn this girl. So there's quite a lot of like, oh, I've definitely drawn this girl. I've drawn her too, and I've drawn her. So there's definitely a lot of recognizable faces in here, and I thought it would be fun to like pop up, you know, old image, new image next to it when I'm drawing it. It is 10 days to draw them all. I'm going to see if I can just do it in the week, the rest of the week, so do it in 1 week. And then we are gonna move on from there. So that's gonna be the first week. I'm not gonna watch any tutorials, I'm not gonna follow any tips or anything. I'm just gonna go in with the knowledge that I already have and just try and improve with practice. Let's jump into Med's 50 Heads. So I thought I would have a quick check-in because I've done 25 heads now from Med's 50 Heads, and the first thing I've noticed is having it up on this board is really good. It helps with perspective and with proportions and everything, and basically it's pretty simple. So it's not a luxury tilt table, it's just this board that I've got some vinyl on, resting on a couple of sketchbooks. So it's a little bit wobbly, the book slides up and down, but it is a lot better than just having it flat on the desk. So I thought I would just quickly take you through the first 25 heads. I've done these in 3 days, but you have to remember I have been on holiday and it has been the weekend. So I'm going to plan to do the next 25 over 4 days, so probably like 6 a day. Math? I don't know. I used a whole bunch of different techniques with them, and yeah, some of them worked, some of them didn't. I don't really know what I'm kind of aiming for, if I want to have a technique that I use every time or if I just kind of want to go with what I feel. I think that's probably going to be more the case, but definitely some things worked better than others. So you'll see sometimes I use the old circle method with just a cross for the eyes and nose. Nothing really, just kind of to put something on the page, and then it does change quite a lot from there. Or sometimes I'll start with like the face shape like this. Overall, I'm quite happy with most of them. This one here I really like, and it was quite difficult because it's a smile, which I don't really draw much. Normally draw the, you know, unoriginal pretty girl looking blankly at the camera. I think that's what we all draw when we first start out, because it's just easy, isn't it? A lot of these are quite difficult. I mean, look at this lady. I gave her cross eyes. The poor lady doesn't have cross eyes in real life. I have drawn a few of these in the past, so I remember drawing this one before. So hopefully I would have found the photos and popped them on the screen so you can see the before and after, kind of, before and in between. Anything from an extreme angle, like this angle especially, where you kind of see like a tiny bit of the eye, I always it just feels like it's not connected, like it's not a 3D, it's 2D. So that's definitely something to focus on. This page here I'm not that happy with. This one I just definitely gave up on this one. Look at it. You can look at it and you can see that it's out, and even when you're drawing it sometimes you know that it's out, but I think I just get lazy and I don't want to correct it, because if I've come 90% of the way into a drawing and I know it's wrong, oh, it's so painful having to start again, isn't it? So I think sometimes like this, I know that it's wrong as I'm drawing it, but I'm just like, let's just finish it and it'll be bad. So this is quite a mixed page too, and I was really happy with how these guys turned out. I think I was definitely warmed up. This lady here, I used kind of like a technique where I'd do the shadows first and then kind of build around it, build up with the shadow shapes, which I do later on, and I think that definitely helped. This was the first dude that popped up. And it's really funny because when I draw guys, I go from I really change my drawing style and I do it more angular, and everything's kind of, I look at the shapes more, which is really helpful. But also with guys, it's a lot easier because they have beards, they have sideburns, the eyebrows are normally a little bit more like square and angular. So it's a lot easier to kind of judge distances and stuff. But again, this was at the extreme angle here, which is very difficult to draw. And I definitely think if you just kind of like did that, the face looks okay. But as soon as you do that, you're like, whoa, what is happening to this person? Exactly the same thing happened in this one. This was the first face I drew today. Let's just move on from that one. Let's call that one a warm-up face. And by the time I got onto this guy, I was kind of feeling the groove and it was going pretty well. I used kind of, this guy was pretty easy to draw because again, he had very strong angles and his beard and everything was quite nice. This lady, I used the shadow technique, and also with this lady, I think they both turned out okay. So these are the last ones, and I used kind of like the shading technique where I'd go very lightly and I'd work up the shadows and then kind of go back over and almost kind of like sculpt in. So you'll do the shadows really roughly, so like this, you know, just like where the shadows are or whatever, and then you could kind of go back in and kind of sculpt out the shadows a little bit more so they were a little bit more defined. So I did that on these two. This was the last one I drew today, and I was feeling a bit tired by the time I got to this guy. Also the fact that he has like 1/3 of a face and the rest is just hair. I think it actually turned out okay. It was not too bad, but all that hair, it was quite difficult to draw. I'd never really drawn a big beard before like that, and the shape of it might be a bit off. But those are the first 25 heads. A lot of them are okay, I think. You can kind of see that I'm kind of getting the hang of drawing them. Some of them, like this one here, not so good. So I think I'm definitely going to try in the second half of Med's heads to maybe slow down a little bit, which is going to take a little bit longer. These have been taking me about 12 to 15 minutes to draw each one, so I think I definitely need to maybe even take 20-25 minutes, which is going to be quite difficult because I'm going back to work next week, something that's worth spending a lot of time on. And let's move on with the rest of the week. So week 1 is done. So I'd quickly go over the second half of week 1. I don't think I've gotten better, but I definitely think I am starting to take my time more. Apart from on faces like this where it goes so wrong to begin with, I just gave up, but oh well. And I still completely believe that the angle, the very extreme angle, is the hardest to draw. There's a couple more coming up in this. I also experimented a lot with different materials in the second half. I even did my 4-color pencil, which not the best. Did some graphite for a while. I didn't like it. I'd never liked graphite. Went back to drawing it with my big fat pencils, the Faber-Castell, and I do love drawing with these pencils. The only problem is you have to keep sharpening them or it gets very difficult to draw, and they're really hard to erase as well. But I'm really happy with how this one turned out. And then I found this Graph Gear 1000 Pentel, and I haven't used it for ages because it wasn't working and it was actually jammed, so I fixed it and I started drawing with this. It's a mechanical pencil, and it really helped me. So all the rest I think I draw with mechanical pencil. So I had purple lead to begin with, and just finding this pencil and drawing with it again I think really definitely helped, because I am not very, what I've realized is that I'm not very precise with my lines when I first start off, and I make quite a few mistakes and I have to overdraw or erase and draw again. And having this line here where it's really skinny and you can do it quite lightly, I find that really helpful. So I definitely found drawing with this improved my drawings. Magic pencil, everyone. Definitely a magic pencil. So I'm really super happy with this page. I think this is probably the best page in the book. This turned out really well. This turned out really well, and this turned out really well, I think. This one here, still a little bit of work, but again, this angle is definitely the one I find the hardest. I think these all turned out pretty well. Again, this one here, I definitely need to work on this angle, and I also need to work on positioning my heads on the page. Although you can see here the pupil gets bigger and bigger, and that's because when I shade, I tend to shade too much and then I just go darker and darker and it kind of gets lost a little bit. I really like this one. The up angle actually isn't as hard as I used to think it was. Again, this one was very difficult because it's from the side. This one here, I think the forehead needs to be a bit taller. I've drawn her before. And this one, this dude was so fun to draw. He had all these tiny little like creases and folds in his face, and it made everything so easy because there's so many different landmarks that you could pinpoint from. So he was awesome to draw. This girl I've drawn before, and that was a very, very difficult view. If you've ever drawn this reference, I think it's quite a popular one on Pinterest. Let us know below if you found this one hard to draw, number 49. It's 50 heads, Pinterest only had 49 on it, so I just randomly picked a 51, and I did not like it. It was not good. Not a good strong face to finish, but that is all my heads, and I think I'm really happy with that. So if we look at so let's look at this page here, which I think is the best, 35 to 38, and we'll go back and look at 11 to 14. So you can see here there was a lot of rushing, I think, not really taking my time, not observing correctly. And then here I think I definitely slowed down a little bit and kind of took more in. So I think that's kind of what I've learned the most, and also just getting back into the practice of drawing faces. So that was the first week, a whole bunch of faces, 50 faces in 7 days. I'm just gonna let some faces run in the background while I have a quick chat about week 1. After every week, think about what I learned and think about how I can move forward. Throughout the first week while I was drawing the faces, it gave me quite a lot of time to think about what my goals are for this month. And of course the goal is to get better drawing faces, but that can mean quite a lot of things. I don't want to be super realism, I still want to be stylized, but I definitely think my top 3 goals that I want to achieve is 1, my observation skills. So I want to be able to draw more correctly what I see rather than what I think I see. So really observing the face, the shapes, and getting that down on paper, and that helps towards likeness. The second goal is to have more of a 3D look to my faces rather than having a 2D look, so showing the actual form of the head, and I think that would be working with shadows, with shadow shapes, the planes of the head and things like that. And then the last thing that I would like to achieve is having cleaner lines. So I did mention that I do sketch quite a lot, and I think sketching is completely fine to get your shapes down and everything, but I tend to go in a little bit too hard and a little bit too sketchy, which makes drawing a finer line and a cleaner line on top of that a lot harder. So I think I need to learn to go in a little bit lighter to begin with, and then really have those nice clean lines at the end, especially around like the smaller shapes like the eyes, the corner of the mouth, and that will really help me out. Before we move on to week 2, I wanted to have a quick look at some of the good drawings I did and some of the bad drawings I did, and compare them to the reference photo, and I thought that would have a really good give me a really good understanding of kind of what I'm doing good, what I'm doing bad, and where to go from there. So let's pop into Procreate, where I have 2 layers here, one called Goodish, one called Baddish. Let's start with Baddish first. And I've just taken 5 of my favourite bad ones and 5 of my favourite good ones. And all I've done is I've popped the reference photo in, put it on 50% opacity, and then I've just gone into curves, and all I did was flip up the curves here to get the background away. And that is just in case you guys want to do the same thing in Procreate, or also you can probably do exactly the same thing in Photoshop because the blender modes work the same. If you think this exercise will be useful to you, definitely give it a go. I've been doing it for about 20 minutes and I've learnt a bit. So let's get going. First one, lovely lady, and I kind of butchered her face a little bit. So I'm beginning to find a few different similarities between how I'm going wrong. I do get some of the features right normally, so like the shape of the eye, if I was to move it over here, you can see it kind of mirrors the shape of the real eye. And the nose, I get things sometimes in good places, but then what completely throws the image out is if I have the eyes, the eyebrow, or the mouth out of place. And normally it is the eyes that I've been finding. So I went one step further and I did some green lines here for the angles of the features, and I thought that would really help me figure out what's going wrong. So I have the angles of the features here, and then the angles of my features. So it's a little bit confusing to see with all of these layers on. But if I just turn it off, you can see the red lines here, what I drew. So everything is completely out of angle here. So the green angles are all kind of going horizontally down, and the red angles that I drew are all going upwards. A very difficult pose here, I think, this side profile. And if we pop it on, we will see that, yes, I start well with the jaw, and then moving up, I tend to shrink everything down, which is why the image itself looks a little bit strange. Everything should be higher up on the page. And what are the angles doing? So the green angles are all popping up this way. The red angles, again, are all popping different ways. So I've got the eyebrows going the right way, but then the eyes actually face down. I have the nose and the mouth going the right way, and the chin, but even having just one angle off changes the entire face shape. In this picture, a lot of things off. Some of the angles, but mostly a lot of placement issues there. This is one of the ones that didn't turn out very good at all. And as you can see, I have squished the face again. It seems like I start pretty well with the chin and the neck. I get those well, and then everything. Look, everything not only is squished in, but it gets bigger as it goes up, which is very strange. And then looking at the angles, these are the angles of the actual face itself. My ones mirror the angles pretty well, actually. They're all just down, so placement issues there. A lot of placement issues. So moving on to the ones that I thought I had drawn quite well. This is the very first one. I think this is number 5. And surprisingly, I thought I would pop these on and they would match pretty well. But actually, some of them are quite out of place. So this one here, you look at it and you think, that's quite nice. Looks like a quite good face. And when you look at the reference, you think, looks quite similar. But when you pop the photo on, you can actually see it's quite out of place. But if we look at the angles, these are the angles of the photo, and these are my angles. And you'll see the angles are very similar. Moving on to Mr. Sexy Pants himself, anonymous bearded man. I'll tell you guys, I enjoy drawing this man. I really liked this drawing when I did it. I still like it now. I think it's really nice. When you pop the reference on, however, you'll see it is a little bit out of whack. And I'm beginning to see a pattern here. I'm beginning to see a pattern of drawing the jaw, the mouth, sometimes even the nose pretty well, and then when it comes to the eyes, I always seem to shift them down a little bit. So that's something I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on in the future. Get it? Keeping an eye on. So these are the angles of the photo, and then these are the angles of the image. And if I turn off my drawing, you can see again that the angles are quite correct. The jaw is perfect, the nose is pretty good, the eyes are pretty good, lips are a little bit off, forehead's a little bit off, but altogether the angles are quite good. I'm thinking that the angles of the features are more important than the placement of the features. Now, with complete realism, sure, it doesn't match, but looking at this as an image, I like it. So every angle pretty much perfect apart from that eye there, which should have been facing downwards. Does my theory work? I think it does. Probably my favorite drawing. Now looking at the drawing, I really enjoyed drawing this and I really like it. When we pop the reference photo on, we can see that actually it's pretty good. Except this eye here just needs to move in a wee smidge and then it's basically done. So I'll move it out again because I don't want to cheat. These are the angles for the reference photo, and pop my ones on, and again pretty much perfect. So apart from that placement of the eye, everything in that drawing is pretty good in my personal humble opinion. To recap, I have learned that I sometimes squish my eyes down, but the most important thing I have found out through this little experiment is to get these angles and these measurements correct. So just to recap the angles again, the angle between the corners of the eye, the placement of the nose there, and then the corner between the lips, the corners of the jaws, so where the jaws are, and if this head is quite face on, so if it was tilted you'd get more of the tilt of the head. So this face is a bit more tilty so we can see a little bit clearer. So really, I think that's kind of what I'm going to be, as well as doing the tutorials, I'm going to be keeping an eye out for all of those little things that I mentioned, and I hope that little exercise wasn't too boring to watch and that maybe it was a little bit helpful if you guys want to do it in the future and just see how your drawings compare to your reference images. And now we're ready to move on to week 2. So that is it for part 1, and then on Thursday I'm going to be posting part 2, which I go through some really cool tutorials over week 2 and 3, and then week 4 I put everything together and I try to make my before picture again as an after picture. It doesn't really turn out very well, but you'll have to come back on Thursday to see how that one turned out. So I hope that you enjoyed this and found it a little bit helpful. If you guys have any helpful resources or tutorials, let us know below in the comments so we can all learn together, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.